live in a small coastal town where the ocean waves seem to whisper stories every time they kiss the sand. My life has been, until now, a mix of routine and small pleasures. I work in a bookstore surrounded by stories that often transport me to distant and exciting worlds. I grew up here, in this place where every alley and every corner keeps a memory of my childhood. My parents, always busy with their jobs, left me a lot of free time to explore and dream. But she was not alone. I had my godfather, Steve, a man of the world, traveler and adventurer, who always told me fascinating stories about the places he had visited. Although he was much older than me, Steve and I always had a special connection. At 28 years old, my life seems pretty settled. I enjoy the little things, the aroma of coffee in the morning, sunsets on the beach, and quiet afternoons reading in my small apartment. But deep down, I have always felt that something was missing, a spark, an emotion that I had not yet discovered. My friends have always told me that I am too dreamy, that I should look for love, but I have never felt the need to look for it. Maybe because deep down, I have always had a special feeling towards Steve, although I never dared to admit it, not even to myself. So here I am, living my quiet life between books and dreams, waiting maybe for something more, something I can't even define clearly. And although I don't know it, my life is about to take an unexpected turn. One summer day, while I was organizing some books in the bookstore, I heard the doorbell jingling. I looked up and there was Steve, with his characteristic smile and that twinkle of adventure in his eyes. I hadn't seen him in months. I was always traveling. "Sarah," he exclaimed enthusiastically. "Long time no see." His words filled me with unexpected joy. "Steve, what a surprise! How long were you going to stay in the city?" He approached the table where I was and set down a travel book. "A few weeks. I need a break from planes and airports. Plus, I missed you." His words took me by surprise. We had always been close, but I had never said anything so direct. I felt my heart beat a little faster. "I missed you too," I admitted, trying to sound casual. "And what adventures do you bring this time?" Steve began to tell me about his last trip to Africa, his eyes shining with the excitement of sharing his experiences. As he spoke, I couldn't help but notice how handsome he looked, how his years of traveling had marked him with an air of maturity and confidence. "We should have dinner together some night, so you can tell me more," I suggested, surprising myself with the proposal. He smiled widely. "I'd love to. How about tonight?" I nodded, excited and nervous at the same time. Something inside me stirred, a mix of excitement and a hint of fear. This dinner could just be a gathering between friends, but something inside me suspected that it could be the start of something new and exciting. The proposal to have dinner with Steve that night fluttered in my mind like a restless butterfly. He was my father's best friend, a man who had been present at every birthday, every family celebration since I was a little girl. The idea of seeing each other alone, outside the family context, made me feel a whirlwind of emotions. Steve was older than me, that was indisputable. But her young spirit, her passion for life, had always attracted me in a way I couldn't fully explain. There was something about him, maybe his experience, his way of telling stories, that made me see him not just as a family friend, but as someone fascinating and attractive. As I closed the bookstore, my mind was spinning. Was it okay to feel this way about Steve? What would my father and the rest of the family think if they found out about my feelings? These questions worried me, but at the same time, the anticipation of dinner filled me with an excitement that I could not ignore. I got ready more carefully than usual, choosing a dress that I knew flattered me. I wanted to see a spark of admiration in Steve's eyes. I wanted him to see me not as the girl I was, but as the woman I had become. When I arrived at the restaurant, I found him already waiting for me, as elegant and confident as always. His smile when he saw me made me feel a pleasant warmth in my chest. Dinner started with the same energy and connection that we had always shared, but I noticed that Steve seemed to have something on his mind, something that had him a little distracted. After a while, just as I was about to enjoy my dish, Steve put down his fork and looked at me seriously. "Sarah, there is something important I need to tell you," he said with a voice that could not hide his nervousness. I stood silently, expectantly, as he continued. "On my last trip, I met someone. I've fallen in love, and I'm about to get married." Those words fell on me like a bucket of cold water. My heart, which moments before was beating with hope and excitement, sank into an abyss of disappointment and confusion. Had I always seen myself as just a girl? How had she not noticed the feelings she had towards him? I tried to maintain my composure, but inside I felt torn. That's wonderful, Steve," I managed to say in a voice I barely recognized as my own. He smiled, relieved by my answer, and continued, "I want to surprise your father and the others. Would you help me organize something special to announce it?" I nodded automatically as my mind tried to process what I had just heard. The entire night, the dinner I had imagined full of romantic possibilities had transformed into a completely different scenario. Now I was complicit in Steve's happiness with another person, a reality that cut me like a dagger. Dinner continued, but my enthusiasm had faded. I participated in the conversation, but my mind was somewhere else, reliving every moment shared with Steve, wondering how I had so misinterpreted our relationship. When the day finally arrived, Steve's fiancée, Alina, turned out to be charming. It was hard not to see why he had fallen in love with her. However, as the party progressed, a bitter feeling began to grow inside me. Anger and frustration at what could have been mixed with sadness at seeing Steve so happy with someone else. At one point in the night, I found the opportunity to talk to Elena alone. The conversation was casual at first, but there was something pushing me, a subtle poison born of my pain and jealousy. Steve has always been a man of the world with so many fascinating stories. I commented, observing his reaction. It must be difficult to maintain a relationship with someone who has so many admirers everywhere he goes. Alina looked at me, a shadow of doubt crossing her face for a moment. "Yes, but I trust him completely," he replied, although his voice wavered slightly. Sure, I agreed with a forced smile. "It's just that, men like him, they're hard to tie down. Always surrounded by temptations, especially on their travels." I saw how my words planted a seed of uncertainty in his mind. It wasn't a blatant lie, but it wasn't the truth either. It was simply a malicious suggestion, a reflection of my own hurt. The party continued, and with it my discomfort grew. The image of Steve and Elena together was like a thorn in my heart. In an attempt to drown out my feelings, I found myself drinking more than usual. Each drink was an attempt to calm the storm raging inside me, but it only served to fuel it. As the night progressed, my judgment became increasingly clouded under the influence of alcohol. The anger and sadness he had been holding back began to take over. I saw Steve standing aside, talking to some guests, and something in me decided that it was time to act, to reveal my feelings, even if it was the most irrational decision. I took advantage of a moment when he was alone and approached him, staggering slightly. "Steve," I said with a trembling voice, "I need to talk to you, in private." He looked at me worried, noticing my state. "Sure, Sarah, are you okay?" I took him to a secluded corner of the garden, where the music and laughter of the party could be heard distantly. My heart was pounding, my mind was spinning in a whirlwind of emotions. Without thinking about the consequences, I approached him and, with an impulsive and desperate impulse, tried to kiss him. Steve pulled away quickly, surprised and confused. "Sarah, what are you doing?" he asked, his voice mixing concern and rejection. I stood there, paralyzed, the reality of what I had just done hitting me like a sledgehammer. Paralyzed by the reality of what I had just attempted, I felt my world falling apart. Shame and despair mixed into a dangerous cocktail inside me. At that moment, something snapped. Rationality and self-control vanished, leaving room for a destructive and vengeful impulse. I walked back to the party, my steps unsteady and my mind clouded by anger and alcohol. I looked at the guests, laughing and enjoying themselves, oblivious to the storm stirring inside me. Then, without thinking about the consequences, I began to murmur to whoever was nearby. With a trembling voice but full of false conviction, "You can't imagine what just happened. Steve and we just went to bed." The words spread like wildfire. Some people looked at me with disbelief, others with hidden morbidity. It soon reached the ears of more and more guests, creating a buzz of gossip and speculation. I didn't stop to think about the damage I was causing, about how these words would affect Steve, Alina, my family. I just wanted to hurt, I wanted Steve to feel even a fraction of the pain I was experiencing. In the middle of the party, tension grew. Steve, alerted by the rumors, came towards me with an expression of disbelief and anger. "What are you doing, Sarah? Why are you saying this?" His words hit me, but I was too lost in my own spiral of self-destruction to stop. "Why? Because it's true," I lied in a voice that sounded strange even to me. The situation escalated quickly. Alina, with tears in her eyes, confronted Steve. There was a chaos of emotions, accusations, and confusion. Steve desperately tried to explain that it wasn't true, but the damage had already been done. The party ended in disaster. The guests left murmuring among themselves, leaving behind an atmosphere full of tension and sadness. I was left alone, slowly realizing the magnitude of what I had done. In the months following that disastrous event, I found myself trapped in a cycle of self-destruction and pain. The anger and resentment I had felt that night evolved into constant bitterness, affecting all my interactions. Tension and anger became my regular companions, distancing me from those who were once close to me. In an unexpected twist, this spiral of negative emotions led me to adopt a more liberal and uninhibited lifestyle. I began to seek solace in short-lived relationships and casual encounters. Every party, every bar became an opportunity to escape my reality, to lose myself in the arms of strangers. Drinking, previously an occasional pleasure, became a necessity to loosen my inhibitions and forget, even for a few hours, the pain I carried inside. These one-night stands were a desperate attempt to feel something, anything other than the emptiness and guilt that plagued me. But each dawn brought with it the harsh reality and the realization that these encounters were nothing more than a temporary palliative for my pain. There was no real connection, no affection, just an exchange of fleeting pleasure that left a bitter taste of loneliness and regret. The bookstore, my former refuge, became a daily reminder of what I had lost. Books, which had once been sources of joy and escape, now felt like empty echoes of a life that I no longer recognized as mine. My relationship with my father was irreparably damaged. The few times we saw each other, our interactions were marked by silence and tension. He felt like he had lost not only her trust, but also her love. In the midst of this emotional chaos, I knew I needed a change. I couldn't continue down this destructive path. In an attempt to seek some type of balance and healing, I began seeking professional help. I knew the road to recovery would be long and difficult, but it was essential if I wanted to regain any part of the person I used to be. And thus concludes my story. A story of desire that could not be completed, and that caused a series of shameful and immature events that I hope to be able to overcome in the future. For now, it is clear to me that I must live with my guilt and take responsibility for my actions. I hope you liked it, and please let me know in the comments what you thought of my attitude and how it all ended. Give me some helpful advice, and I would appreciate it if someone could understand and support me. Thank you very much, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of desire. See you soon.
In the vibrant city of London, where each street tells a different story, lived Henry and I, Dana, a couple who had found their little corner of happiness in the middle of the urban hustle and bustle. I, in my 30s, devoted myself to cooking, a passion that pushed me to experiment with flavors and textures, while Henry, in his 32 years, was an architect with an eye for detail that reflected in everything he did. Our apartment inn was a reflection of our lives, a college of modernity and personal touches. "I love how this place really feels like ours, you know," Henry commented one afternoon, observing our shared space. "Everything here has a story, a reason for being." I smiled, nodding as I cut vegetables for dinner. "Yes, it's like our own little work of art. Each piece tells something about us." Our evenings were simple but full of warmth. Cooking together had become one of our favorite activities, a dance between pots and pans where everyone brought their own special touch. "How about we add a little more spice this time?" I suggested, while Henry passed me the spices. "I trust your instincts as a chef," he replied with a smile, while examining some plans on the dining room table. But, as often happens, life always has unexpected turns, and ours was about to arrive, in the least expected way, challenging the tranquility of our daily lives and testing the strength of our relationship. It was a Saturday morning, the kind of day London seems to take a break, when she arrived in the neighborhood. Her name was Mia, a 28-year-old young woman whose energy seemed to light up the entire street. She was moving into the apartment right across the street from ours, and her arrival did not go unnoticed. Laughter, music, and the sound of unpacking boxes filled the air. Henry and I leaned out the window, watching curiously. "Looks like we have a new neighbor," I commented, not being able to help but notice her natural attractiveness and the ease with which she moved, as if each step was a dance. "Oh, right. Is that true?" Henry asked, glancing briefly before returning to his morning coffee. His indifference reassured me a little, but I couldn't deny the pang of jealousy I felt. "She's very pretty," I added, trying to sound detached. "You look much prettier," Henry said with a smile, giving me a kiss on the forehead. I appreciated his words, but I couldn't help but wonder what he would really think when he met her. A few days later, we ran into Mia in the hallway. His smile was contagious, and his conversation full of enthusiasm for life in the big city. "It's great to meet my new neighbors. I hope I don't make too much noise with the move," she said with a laugh that sounded like music. "Not at all. It's good to have a little more life in the building," Henry replied kindly. I couldn't help but notice the way his eyes followed his movements, something that made me feel a mix of emotions. Was it just courtesy, or was there something more in his look? That evening, as we prepared dinner, I couldn't help but return to the subject. "Mia seems very nice, don't you think?" "Yes, it's nice," Henry replied, focused on cutting the vegetables. "But you know, no one compares to you." I wanted to believe his words, but a little voice inside me was starting to question things. Mia's arrival had added a new ingredient to our quiet life, and I wasn't sure how it would change the recipe of our relationship. In the following weeks, Mia's presence in the neighborhood became more notable. His warm greetings every time we passed each other in the hallway, the occasional invitations for coffee, and his constant enthusiasm for exploring the city. It all seemed innocent at first, but I couldn't help but notice how sometimes Henry would get lost in thought, looking off into the distance toward Mia's door as we passed her apartment. One afternoon, while Henry was at work, I found myself in the elevator with Mia. "Dana, I was just thinking of organizing a little get-together this weekend. Would you like to come? It would be great if you and Henry joined us," she said with a smile lighting up her face. "Sure, that sounds fun," I replied, trying to hide the uncertainty in my voice. Part of me wondered if this was a good idea, but another part wanted to see how the situation would play out. Saturday came, and the gathering at Mia's house was a buzz of people, music, and laughter. I observed how Henry chatted with Mia, laughing at her anecdotes and sharing stories about the city. I felt a mixture of pride and nervousness seeing him so sociable, but I couldn't help but a shadow of doubt crossed my mind. Later, while I was helping Mia in the kitchen, I couldn't resist. "So, are you liking the city so far?" I asked casually. "Oh, I love it. There's so much to see, so much to experience," she replied, her enthusiasm genuine. "And amazing people," she added with a meaningful glance towards where Henry was. As I returned to the living room, I couldn't help but feel a growing tension. The way they looked at each other, while subtle, seemed to have a weight to it that wasn't there before. Later, when we returned to our apartment, the image of them laughing together wouldn't leave my head. "You had fun?" I asked Henry as we got ready for bed. "Yes, it was a good evening. Mia is a very good hostess," he replied, seemingly without concern. I lay awake for a moment, thinking. Something had changed, a subtle but palpable dynamic. I didn't know if it was just my imagination, or if there was really something more between Henry and Mia. What I did know was that things between us, in one way or another, had begun to change, and I wondered where this new chapter would take us. The weeks passed and my worry grew. Henry seemed to be the same as always, but every little detail, every distant look, every smile while receiving a message on his phone made me wonder. Was it possible that something was happening between him and Mia? Or were these just the ghosts of my insecurities creating stories where there were none? One night, as Henry and I ate dinner in silence, a question burned inside me. "Have you ever been interested in anyone else since we've been together?" My voice sounded shakier than I had expected. Henry looked at me surprised, placing his cutlery on the table. "Where did that come from, Dana? Are you suggesting something about Mia?" "No, that's not it." I tried to explain, but the words got stuck in my throat. "I just wonder if sometimes." He sighed, taking my hand. "Dana, I love you. I never had eyes for anyone else. Are you okay?" And there it was, the question I couldn't answer. Was I okay? Was I seeing signs where there were none? Were my unfounded jealousies creating a wedge between us? I began to notice how my doubts were affecting our relationship. I found myself irritable, sometimes responding abruptly to Henry's affectionate gestures, feeling guilty immediately afterwards. "I'm sorry," I found myself saying more often, without really knowing what I was apologizing for. One afternoon, while Henry was in the living room, I decided to observe him discreetly. Was there anything in his manner that indicated a change? But all I saw was the man I loved, relaxed in our house, enjoying a book. Am I going crazy? I asked myself. Was it possible that I was letting my fears and jealousies invent a story that didn't exist? I didn't want to lose Henry, but at the same time, I felt like I was pushing him away for no reason. That night, lying in bed, I watched Henry sleep. His calm face, his peaceful breathing. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust in us. But there was something, a little voice in my head that kept asking, what if there was something more? What if jealousies weren't just jealousies? Uncertainty had become my constant companion, and I knew I had to find a way to confront it, for better or worse. The following days passed in a sort of emotional fog. I saw Henry leave for work. Sometimes I exchanged a few words with Mia in the hallway, and each interaction left me with more questions than answers. Was I imagining things? Or was there something more to those smiles and casual conversations? One Friday afternoon, I decided to visit a friend, Laure, looking for some clarity. "I'm completely lost, Laure," I confided to her while having coffee in her cozy apartment. "I don't know if it's just unfounded jealousy or if there's really something between Henry and Mia." Laure, always the voice of reason, looked at me with concern. "Have you talked about this with Henry? I mean, really talk, straight up." "Yeah, but everything seems so normal when I do it. I feel like I'm exaggerating everything." That evening, when Henry came home, I tried to act normal, but there was something about his behavior that seemed different to me. He was quieter than usual, absorbed in thought. "Is something wrong, Henry?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "I've been thinking," he began, hesitantly. "How about we invite Mia to dinner tomorrow? I think it would be nice to get to know her better, to make her feel more welcome in the neighborhood." The idea took me by surprise. Was this an opportunity to see how they interacted together, to clarify my doubts? "Sure, that sounds like a good idea," I replied, although part of me was twisted with nervousness. Dinner with Mia was filled with vibrant, seductive energy. From the moment she walked in, wearing a dress that seemed to hug every curve of her figure, I knew this evening would be different. His stories of exotic escapades and nocturnal adventures were told with a twinkle in his eye that fascinated me. "You must have broken hearts on every continent," I joked, pouring another round of wine. Mia laughed, a laugh that sounded like music. "Oh, maybe one or two, but I always prefer to leave happy memories behind." Henry, always the perfect host, watched us with a smile, although he seemed more interested in the wine than the conversation. The tension I had felt at the start of the evening dissipated, giving way to a growing fascination with our guest. At one point, while Henry was busy in the kitchen, Mia leaned towards me, her eyes shining mischievously. "Dana, there's something in your eyes that tells me you're not as innocent as you seem." I felt like a fire was lit inside me. "Well, they say chefs always keep a secret or two," I replied, playing with the rim of my wine glass. "I would love to discover these secrets one day," she whispered, with a look that made me question everything I had known so far. The rest of the evening was a whirlwind of laughter, shared glances, and an electric tension in the air. Every time our hands accidentally brushed against each other, a flood of emotions ran through me. After Mia left, I found myself thinking about what had happened. It was a new and disconcerting sensation. The attraction I felt for her was something I had never experienced. There, sitting on our couch after Mia had left, I couldn't help but think about what had happened. I had started the evening with a mixture of curiosity and jealousy, fearing that Mia might pose a threat to my relationship with Henry. But in a surprising and unexpected twist, I had discovered that the person Mia had truly captivated was me. It was such an unexpected revelation that it almost felt surreal. All this time I had been concerned that Henry might be attracted to her, but it turned out it was me who was completely fascinated. How had this happened? How had I gone from insecurity and jealousy to feeling this spark, this connection with Mia? I remembered each of our encounters, the conversations filled with laughter and complicity, and how his presence made me feel alive in a way I couldn't explain. And then it all made sense. It wasn't jealousy I felt. It was an attraction that I had tried to ignore, to explain away in another way. I laughed to myself, thinking about the irony of the situation. I had been so preoccupied with Henry, and now I found myself in this whirlwind of new and confusing emotions. How crazy, I muttered out loud, still processing what had happened. Life really had mysterious ways of surprising you. And this is where my confession ends. I would like you to help me make a decision. What would you do in my situation? I hope you liked it, and if you want to continue enjoying shocking stories about relationships, I invite you to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you and see you next time.
It's always strange how life turns you around. There I was, married to the sweetest man in the world, Thomas. With his sincere smile and his eyes full of love, the kind of person you always dream of meeting. Curiously, in my adolescence, his brother Justin was my high school crush. Justin was the complete opposite of Thomas, the rebel, the bad boy that all the girls longed to have by their side. I was just one of the crowd, invisible to him. And although Thomas was always there, being the perfect friend, I could never get Justin out of my head. Despite those youthful feelings for Justin, life took me down a different path, a much better one. At university, I met Thomas in a special way. It was a crush, one of those loves that catch you off guard and change your life. Suddenly, that platonic love for Justin faded, remaining a distant memory. Thomas was incredibly different from his brother. Where Justin was impulsive and unrestrained, Thomas was thoughtful and calm. His kindness and genuine concern for others showed me what love really meant. With Thomas, everything was easy and natural. He supported my dreams, listened to my concerns, and celebrated my successes as if they were his own. When we were together, I didn't need anyone else. I fell in love with her laugh, her way of seeing life, her ability to find happiness in the simplest things. Thomas showed me that true love is not about constant butterflies in the stomach, but about a deep connection, about feeling complete. With him, I saw a future, a life together of family. And so that childish and absurd love for Justin became a simple anecdote from my youth. Something to laugh about when you remember your school days. Justin, after all, went his own way. He joined the military and immersed himself in a life of missions abroad, almost disappearing from our lives. For years, I didn't hear from him. Thomas and I built our life together with love, laughter, and future plans. I had completely forgotten about that teenage love. Until one day, Thomas woke me up from bed with news that would turn my life upside down. "Honey, I received a call from Justin," he said with a smile on his face. "He's coming home this week. He's finished his mission and wants to host a dinner with the whole family." I felt a little nervous. Justin, back after so long. Part of me was excited to see him, curious to know what he had become after so many years. But another part of me was nervous. Memories of my old crush surfaced, reminding me of those school days. "Justin, wow, that's unexpected," I responded. Thomas was very excited. "Yeah, I haven't seen him in years. It'll be great to have him back, don't you think?" "Sure, it will be." "Interesting," I said, forcing a smile. Throughout the week, Thomas seemed excited, talking nonstop about what we would do, the places we would show Justin, and the memories we would share. I nodded and smiled. "Do you think Justin has changed a lot?" I asked one night while Thomas and I were preparing dinner. He stopped, thoughtful. I don't know. Military life changes people, but he's still my brother. We'll always have that in common. I nodded, thinking about how experiences change people, shape their personalities, their lives. I wondered if the Justin I remembered would still exist in some way, or if he would be someone completely different. The day of dinner arrived. While I was cooking, my mind went back and forth between the past and the present. What would the reunion be like? Would Justin remember those days at school, or would I just be a blurry memory in his memory? Then the door opened, and there he was. Taller, more mature, with a presence that filled the room. What struck me most was seeing him in his military uniform, impeccable, decorated, reflecting years of service and discipline. But his eyes, those eyes were still the same. "Justin," Thomas said, his voice full of joy and surprise at seeing him in uniform. "Brother, how long?" Justin smiled. "Too long," he responded, returning Thomas' hug. Then his eyes met mine. For a moment, I felt like I was transported back to those school days. And then he turned to me with a smile. "And you must be my little brother's famous wife. Thomas can't stop speaking wonderful things about you." The words, the tone, everything about him evoked a mixture of nostalgia and admiration. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person, Justin," I said, extending my hand. He took it, and for a second. His firm grip reminded me of that bold, confident boy I once knew. Dinner passed between stories and laughter. Justin, with his natural charisma, had us captivated with his adventures and anecdotes from his missions abroad. Each story was more surprising than the last, from dangerous escapades to encounters with completely different cultures. It was fascinating and a little overwhelming to hear everything he had experienced. Thomas got up to prepare the drinks for the after-dinner meal, leaving me alone with Justin. At that moment, I got quite nervous. Being alone with him after so many years, after so many hidden feelings, was a little intimidating. "And you? What has your life been like all these years?" Justin asked, his gaze fixed on mine. "Well, you know, normal life. Nothing as exciting as your stories," I replied. There was a silence, and for some stupid reason, I felt the need to fill it. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. "You know, even though we didn't know each other when we were teenagers, I was madly in love with you. It's so absurd to think about it now." Justin looked surprised for a moment, then smiled slightly. "Really? Wow, I didn't expect that." I felt embarrassed, wondering why he had said that. "Yeah, well, you were the popular kid, the rebel. I guess that's a teenage thing, right?" "I guess so," Justin said. "But look where we are now. You happily married to my brother and me, just returned from who knows where." Thomas returned with the glasses, breaking the tension of the moment. We toasted and continued the after-dinner meal, but inside, I kept asking myself, why had I felt the need to reveal that old feeling? In the days that followed, I couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. My confession to Justin had stirred emotions that I thought I had forgotten. I was scared at the idea that Justin would reveal my old crush to Thomas, and that he would notice the obsession I felt for him. If I had really forgotten him, why did I never mention these feelings to Thomas, even if it was anecdotally? It was strange to bring it to light now, and not before. There was supposedly nothing to hide. The situation got worse when Justin suddenly called Thomas with a serious voice, asking to meet alone. My heart stopped. "What's wrong, Justin? Is everything okay?" Thomas asked, changing his expression to one of concern. "Yes, but I need to talk to you." "It's important," Justin replied seriously. After hanging up, Thomas looked at me. "Justin wants to talk." It seemed serious. The hours following's call were torment for me. My head kept beating me, imagining the worst-case scenario. What if Justin told Thomas about my absurd confession? I couldn't bear the thought of my marriage being affected by a teenage love that no longer meant anything to me. In a fit of desperation, I decided to follow Thomas to his meeting with Justin, to secretly observe them and try to interpret what was happening. I hid near the cafeteria where they met. From my hiding place, I could see their expressions, but not hear their words. The conversation seemed serious, with Justin showing signs of insecurity and anticipation for Thomas's reaction. At the end, they embraced each other in a strong hug and said goodbye with palpable emotion. When Justin walked away, I ran towards Thomas, driven by an irrational fear. Thomas, I can explain it. The Justin thing was stupid. I don't feel anything for him anymore. It was just a teenage thing. I stammered, almost hysterical. Thomas' face fell completely when I told him that, and his expression of confusion intensified. "What are you talking about?" he repeated, clearly bewildered. "What are you talking about?" My heart was racing, and I realized that I had made a big mistake by revealing my old secret in this impulsive way. Thomas began to look restless. "Did something happen between you and my brother?" "Why are you so nervous?" she asked. No, nothing happened," I exclaimed, trying to calm the situation. "It's just that, when we were teenagers, before I met you, I had a little crush on Justin. But that was years ago, and it never meant anything. Nothing ever happened between us." Thomas looked at me, trying to process the information. "And why are you so upset about that now?" I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. "I thought Justin was going to tell you that, and I didn't know how you would react. But now I realize I was being ridiculous. I'm sorry." Thomas relaxed a little, but still seemed worried. "Justin only told me that during his military missions, he realized that he likes men. And he was nervous about how our family would react. He didn't mention anything about you." After that revealing encounter, my life returned to reality. The obsession I had felt with Justin dissipated like smoke, leaving behind only an anecdote that, over time, I even found funny. It had been a short and confusing chapter, but one that I finally closed, leaving me with a valuable lesson about the importance of honesty and communication in relationships. Thomas didn't give it much importance. He understood that it was a feeling from the past, and that what was important was what we shared now. Our marriage grew stronger from that moment, with a new layer of trust and mutual understanding. Interestingly, my relationship with Justin also changed. After his own confession and my ill-advised revelation, we found common ground where we understood each other better. Justin became a close friend, someone I could trust and laugh with at life's twists and turns. Over time, Justin's visits became a normal and pleasant part of our lives. We shared dinners, talks, and laughter, strengthening family ties. Justin's confession about his sexual orientation opened a space of openness and sincerity in the family. Looking back, I realized that each of those moments of confusion had been a stepping stone toward greater understanding and maturity. I learned to value what really mattered: unconditional love, trust, and the ability to laugh together at the whims of the past. And so ends my confession. A story that ended up being funny, but that hid some secrets from the past that, like karma, came back to me when I least expected it. I hope you liked my story. If so, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for future confessions. Thank you so much.